Hey friends, welcome back. We're glad to be back.
It's been forever.
It's been a
Let's
minute,
just
yeah.
let's kind of
been a
own
long
it. It's
time.
really good to be
That's
back.
okay though.
And
Yeah.
it feels kind of like the beginning of summer. So though it isn't officially summer yet, it's like summer eve, and there's been a whole lot of preparation and feelings about summer, and it's kind of here. Can I just prime the pump a bit about something that
Prime it.
I'm kind of
Absolutely.
feeling a bit?
Please.
So I always feel anxiety about summer because I have a huge yard, and all of the things I have to do in the yard, I have like big bushes and trees and just branches, but it isn't like branches like, oh, I got to pick up a branch. It's like branches.
Logs.
Got a forest.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so it's like, oh, that season is here that I am carrying and dragging branches. And, I have this big pile in the back that by the end of the summer, I pay someone to come and they chip the pile. It typically costs like $1,000 for them to chip the
Jeez.
pile.
Wow.
That's how big the pile is. That's why I'm like,
a big pile.
There's branches, and there's a season that I am just carrying branches. And I've been at this house for a very long time, and there's a season of branch carrying that I dread. The other day, I thought, I have a pickup truck. I've had a pickup truck for the same amount of time that I've had the house. The branches can go in the back of the pickup truck, and I can just drive to the brush pile. Why have I never, ever put the branches in the back of the truck to go to the brush pile? I am finding I'm enjoying summer eve because I'm just playfully throwing the branches in the back of the in the back of my truck, driving it to the brush pile. And there's something poetic
Yes.
that I'm trying to point out here going into summer, because as I don't know, as people, as parents, as elderly, each season kind of holds this like burdensome act or perspective, and the odds are is you have a pickup truck that you didn't ever use, and so I'm kind of just tossing it out there because I've just been baffled at how fun it is to throw the branches in the pickup truck and drive that thing. But I've had it the whole time.
This is your season though of the pickup truck.
This is the season of the pickup truck, and from a faith perspective, how does that tie into anything, man?
Well, I think before we get into the faith perspective, like what the reality that you're talking about rings true for so many people. Like we were joking about the term Maycember. 'Cause
Maycember.
It's like it's the reality of the holiday season of December, but it's May, and it's more, I don't know, it's less celebration and all of the obligation at the same time, unless like
So explain that a bit. Unpack this.
Yeah, so I think parents with kids in schools and everything, I think, can relate to this most. But even my parents, they remember that time, with kids and stuff. But all the things are happening in May, all the performances and end of year programs and
It's awful.
parties and So and of course your kids want you to be at everything, and we want to be at everything. But there is this like sense of like schedule and obligation to be there and everything. But it's funny what I'm finding. I just came from one right before we started this. And it was kind of one of those like, okay, we need to check these off and get to this day. And then I'm sitting in the actual performance watching her just spill out every creative thing she has in her in this moment.
And this is your daughter.
This is my
Yeah,
daughter,
yeah.
yeah. And it's like you were filled with so much joy in this moment. It's the getting there and getting to the next one, where I'm focusing, which I hate that I do that, but it's like sitting in that moment of actually experiencing the joy she's put into this, But
Well, and that's the big thing. Like, so this week I have 2 award ceremonies, 2 graduations, and then 4 graduation parties and 2 weddings.
that's because you had so many kids.
Oh, I know, but like,
I'm kidding.
I am
No, you're not.
so the same way as you, Jenny. Like when I approach this stuff, often I approach it honestly, with a little bit of frustration and a little bit of bitterness, because I'm like, man, all this stuff I got to do, and I got to do everything else I got to do. Like, it's overwhelming. But last week I was sitting at one of my kids, they were getting an award, and I thought to myself, this is the first award she has ever gotten in middle school. And trying to see it from the perspective of my kid has actually kind of reshaped the way that I approach these things, because for me, it's just another thing to do, another place to be at. But for my kid, like, this is a really, really big deal to be the only kid in the entirety of 7th grade honored for something.
Right.
And so I've been trying to, and I still fail at times, but I've been trying to step into the joy of my kid, into the joy of these experiences, and go, okay, well, I may not have a lot of joy in this moment, but I'm going to borrow joy from that thing over there, from that person over there. And yeah, I don't know. I'm actually looking forward to some of the ones that I have to go to now, because you just don't know.
Yeah.
I have less obligations than you guys do. My kids are a lot younger. They're 5 and 7.
You're on the horizon. You're getting there.
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
closer.
I'll get there eventually. But I'm feeling similar to KJ. I don't have nearly as much work to do where I live as like where he lives. But like, there's things like the sprinklers. A few weeks ago, turned on the sprinkler system and couldn't find one of the sprinkler heads, and like all of them were turning on except for one. And so I walk over to where it should be, and the ground just starts like raising, and it's like this slow volcano and this like cascade of water. And it's like, oh, great, there's the sprinkler head. So I turned off the sprinklers, and like I reach my hand, like expecting to find the sprinkler head like an inch below the grass, and I'm like elbow deep, and there's this cistern of water under the ground. And so, and there's other things too, but like I spent a couple days on it, but like as I was working on it, the last day that I attempted to do it, like my wife and kids were having like a water balloon fight in the front yard, and I'm like cussing at my sprinklers. Right. And I had tried the last thing, and growing up, my dad had instilled in me this like philosophy or this burden of like, if you can fix it, you must, because it saves money. And so I have this burden, this weight that is self-imposed of I have to do everything I can think of before. And then how it used to feel is like, if I get to the point where I can't do anything, I have failed. I have to like spend money that could have gone towards humiliatingly needing the help of an expert to like come in. And I was proud of myself in the sense of it was a similar like, I'm just going to throw these in the back of the pickup truck, with kind of like the reverse financial reality of like, I've done everything I can. And I put down the wrench, and I picked up a water balloon, and I threw it at my son. And like, and it was
joy commenced.
And it was like a beautiful day, and it was like, so I thought of that when you talk about, it's like, what are the sticks that you're carrying that you don't actually have to carry? It's like, that's one of them. And like, there was a Saturday night where I had an event I had to go to, and I thought about, it's like, I could just stay for the beginning of this. That's all I have to go. And ask this, like, can I leave early? And the person in charge said, yes, absolutely. And I came home, and I blew bubbles for my daughter, and I played soccer with my son. And it's just like, when we recognize the sticks that we don't need to be carrying, or to like really get in to the reality of the illustration, not pretending the sticks don't exist, but just finding a different way to like do something with them. It's interesting to see the things that open up, because I think there's a lot of have-tos that we feel in this season that aren't actually have-tos. Going to your daughter's talent show, you have to do that. That's incredible. But there's a lot that we don't.
Well, that's one of the things that I think I've learned most from you is, to use this metaphor, it's learning which sticks you don't even have to pick up. Like, there are some sticks that are totally okay being on the ground. Like, you guys know this. Stetson, he says no a lot. It's like, hey, Stetson, do you want it? Nope. Stetson, can you help? Nope. He says yes to like the things he needs to say yes to, and to the important
when
things.
he says yes,
Yeah.
there's a sparkle in his eye,
Yes.
and he smiles.
Exactly.
Like you tapped into something valuable for him.
But I think the reason that the yes Stetson gives is so important and so significant, it's not because he said yes, it's because of all the other things that he said no to.
Yeah.
And I'm probably the opposite. Like I say yes to every stick. I'm walking down the road. Oh, there's a stick. Let me go ahead and pick that up.
You're doing much better at that now.
But
though.
I don't know that that's healthy.
No, I'm
for
saying
real.
you've been doing better about saying no, and I can't,
Yeah, so I wonder if that's like what I need to grow in this season, this summer eve or whatever it is you guys are calling it. It's like, okay, well, maybe I just got to leave some sticks on the ground and go blow some bubbles.
I'll say to the same degree, I've learned, like coming from the opposite side of the pendulum, you've helped me swing into a healthier balance too, of like
Teamwork.
oh, like I have more capacity than I thought. And like in my mind, when you said that's something I've really learned from you, I thought in my head, how to be lazy.
No.
Because that's an unhealthy default.
How to
from where my
prioritize what's
personality-
healthy
I
and
know,
what's
but,
good.
I know, but like, yeah, I think there's a healthy balance there that we've helped each other come closer to.
I gotta hop in here and kind of interject. I can kind of hear some of the people I've been talking to about the podcast. First of all, hello everybody. It's been so cool to be able to talk to different people, and they're talking about the podcast and conversation. There's been quite a few people just who have said, I don't understand the thing that you guys are talking about.
I love that.
I just don't understand it, but I enjoy it, but I don't get it. And it's typically about the things that aren't sermon centric, because I think the expectation has been that the podcasts are about the sermon or our church content. I can poetically actually say it is. This is all about the things that are being experienced, and I think our goal is always. So if I'm doing a sermon, the goal isn't that you hear the content and you understand the content, but it's you become the content. And so from a biblical perspective, a living word perspective, our goal is to interpret everything through the lens of the biblical context. And so if someone can talk about a chicken sandwich and preach the gospel, or blowing bubbles, and talking about the enjoyment of God, that's kind of the goal, because it's a very applicable experiential thing, and that's what poetry is. I'm a big poetry guy, but it doesn't have to be the text on the page that's a poem, but poetry is a verbal expression that the human heart can understand. So like a good song that you hear that you go, I know exactly what that person is feeling. That hit this like poetic tone, or you hear something, or you see a movie that speaks the vocabulary of your heart. The hope of our podcast is it does kind of the same thing, that you hear this and you feel seen, you feel at home, you feel like this is fun, and somehow it all kind of combines into the church experience. And so I was just hearing that them in the back, I don't understand. And I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
But there's this Jewish rabbi who said, if the Bible doesn't tell you what to tell you with your pots and your pans and how to clean your clothes, then it probably isn't the Bible.
Wow.
And I was like, man, there's something in that's pretty cool.
I don't even know how to respond to that, man. Outside of yes and amen. But like even this conversation, right? You know, not to go into the sermon series that we're in right now, but like you look at that and then you talk about, well, what do we want to carry? What do we not want to carry? What do we want to have fun with? It's like the application and the way that these things hold hands.
Yep.
Like it's pretty palpable.
Well, you even can, or you should bring in our current sermon series. So I kind of opened up the door for that. Like, there's this sermon series that our church is doing on how to engage politics, but I think it's pretty apparent that every sermon that is done in a sermon series almost applies to every human interaction that someone could have, and then you're like, so are human interactions actually politics? It's how to talk to each other, how to sit in the same spaces with people that are different.
And that's one of the ways that Pastor Allen even talked about politics, right? It's like how do we engage in a larger cultural conversation about what is good and what is right and what is true? I think sometimes we actually cheapen politics too much to be in like these party lines that we vote in. To be political is to be human, because we all exist and operate within a cultural context, within a community, and how we navigate that, like,
that's politics.
yeah, we've got to do it with mercy. We've got to do it with compassion. We've got to do it with love in our hearts.
There was something that we talked about when Pastor Allen was kind of going over his thoughts for what he's going to share this upcoming weekend. We got kind of excited about a tangent that maybe he'll figure out a way to work it in. But we were talking about, like, he's going to be talking about peacemaking, but then we talked about the personality types that are fighters. And then we talked about the dignity of that trait of like, well, there's something good about this desire to fight. But we felt like we needed to come up with an alternative to the word fight, because even in the passage it was in, it had this negative context. So Jenny had a really good one. Like, she thought of the word challenge, right? Was that the right word?
Yeah, that was the word.
And then Nathan, like, he had a really good one of like advocate. It's like,
I love that one.
I love that one too. And just kind of like this distinction between, it's like people who have this drive to fight. But then I was listening to this song on this new album.
Poetry.
Yeah. And one of the lines was, you don't want to win the war because you don't want the peace. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant.
That you enjoy fighting so much
Exactly.
that you don't want it to end.
Yeah.
You have become the battle.
Yes. Yeah. You fight to fight, not to bring peace, because if peace comes, then you have nothing to fight about anymore.
Which I think when we live in that place, we actually lose a little bit of touch with our humanity, right? So you go back to the garden, right? You see that God created, right? Everything was in order. God was bringing shalom to people. And I think when we have that posture of fighting, right? If that's who we are, well, I'm a fighter, so I'm going to fight. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to challenge. I'm going to do all this stuff. It's like, well, are you actually running away from the very thing that God is trying to invite you into? Like, when we choose that as an identity, and again, they're like, when you're an advocate, there's some things that we are fighting for, but like in a really healthy way. But it's not for the fight itself. It's actually so that people could experience peace. And I don't know, like I think about this whole series we're in and just my experience talking and engaging with people kind of in the political realm. Like I can't help but wonder if a lot of people have lost sight of that.
Well, and how many people are just unaware of it in their own humanness, that this is how, like, I think there are things that the way we operate, myself included, I don't even realize that it could be damaging to myself or others, but it's just how I operate, and I like having these kind of conversations where you really take a beat to sit and be like, am I doing this? Like, rather than looking at what others are doing. Because when it comes to, issues in politics, you're not self-focused at all. You are very focused on the other. And so taking time in this season to be a little more self-focused on how my initial reaction, how I respond, words I use.
Yeah. And what's the end goal? Like,
Yeah. To be right.
Yeah,
To win.
but if you, I mean, I am like one of those people that I feel like I am like built to be a soldier.
Yes.
I mean, like,
yes, you are.
and it's been a hard thing of like, I am built to fight, but
Yep.
I don't have anything to fight for or to fight in. And so that there's like this, like,
Is it chaos inside of you? Or is
so it's not chaos, but it's a, there's something there.
You have been longing for the zombie apocalypse
Yeah.
to begin.
I am prepared.
That is the context that you were meant to exist in.
And I'm eat me first.
So like when the pandemic happened, it was chaos for the culture, and I'm like, I'm prepared for this.
Yep.
I want to fight for something. I want to, and I think if I see, if I'm going to fight, I want to have an end goal that I can celebrate and say there was victory.
Yeah.
And so when I see a lot of the conversations at hand, that there hasn't ever been a victory, it's like the system has been rigged that the battle doesn't end. And it kind of subdues and controls the people caught in it, and so I've been enjoying this conversation a lot because there seems to be this shift in perspective of how do you fight for the kingdom, and there is victory compared to being subdued in the anger and the chaos that has been co-opted, so that your voice is drowned out.
When I think we. One of the ways we do this is I think we need to humanize things. So this is what I love about Jesus, right? Whenever the Pharisees or the Sadducees or religious leaders were getting up in arms about stuff, it was always these kind of general issues about, oh, it's the Samaritans, it's the pagans, it's these people, it's whatever. But like Jesus, he actually chose to engage the individual and to see them where they were and to meet them where they were, to get to know them and to love them right where they were. And I think a part of the problem that just kind of culturally we have in the church is that we are really good about talking about issues. We have a very difficult time talking about individual people in a relational kind of way. Like we can do it from a distance, but to actually sit down and get to know somebody, right? A few podcasts ago, I mentioned this kind of study thing that happened where a bunch of people were brought out to DC. You got the gun right activists, you got the NRA people, right? All these different groups that shouldn't get along. And when they stepped into the room, bickering, fighting, hatred. But as they got to know one another, as they got to know one another's stories, well, suddenly that issue became a person.
Yeah.
I can dismiss an issue. I can make all kinds of assumptions about an issue. But when I know a person, when I've actually broken bread with them and sat down and heard about their family and their story and their journey, man, it is so much harder to be bitter and to be angry towards that people. And so when we talk about fighting, what is our problem? Well, I think our problem is we're fighting for issues when instead we really need to be advocating for people. And there is a very big difference between those two things. When you fight for an issue, it's just purely apolitical. It's like what it is, right? It's all about Republicans or Democrats or libertarians. But when you're advocating for people, well, you don't care what their political allegiance is because you know more fundamentally they are a soul, they are a person, and that person matters.
It's good.
It's like the conditions to fight have to be rooted in love and seeing the humanity of the people, not just the ones you're fighting for, but the ones that you feel this instinct to fight against. I took this workshop a few weeks ago about like innovation, and the guy was brilliant. Like he said, when you're trying to innovate, when you're doing a new thing, it has to start with love, because the best innovation is an expression of love. Like innovation is an expression of love. And so to steal that verbiage, just like trying it out and putting it in here, it's like, how can fighting be an expression of love? If it's not an expression of love, is it a good
and I think when we pursue love and relationship, it's going to change the things that we want to fight about. I don't know if you guys ever read the book All Quiet on the Western Front.
Every day.
Dude, it's powerful.
I
but
watched
like,
the
there's
movie.
Actually,
that story, right?
That
You
was
got
a
the
fib. I have never.
That's okay. That's okay. We can edit that out. But you've got the Germans who are going up against the Allied forces, right? And it's Christmas Eve.
Yep.
And what do? Instead of fighting, they actually go out and they play football and they get to know one another. Well, when the battle started up again the next day, everyone there refused to shoot their friends. And so they all had to be moved off the line and new troops had to be brought in because that's
amazing.
That's what happens, right? When you get to know people, you're like, man, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to kill you and destroy you. I want to find a way to be able to love and to protect you.
But then on the other side of that coin, if the movie is a good interpretation of or representation of the book, assuming these new troops are the ones that the book is talking about, a treaty was made and they set a date for the war to be over, and there were like hours left, and a commander of one of the sides felt it necessary to defend his own honor and sent his troops into battle knowing the war was going to be over a few hours from then. And it's just like, why?
Yeah.
Why? It's like they figured something out on Christmas,
Yeah.
and a guy didn't have it figured out.
And so how often do we do that same thing? Because the battle has already been won. Jesus is king. Jesus is victorious. We know how the story ends. So are we sometimes sending ourselves off to a battle that we don't need to fight?
Absolutely, because it seems that there's a season coming up, just kind of like summer, and it brings us into a place of anxiety.
Yeah.
Because you can anticipate the chaos that is about to ensue. And I think all of us have been surprised at the simplicity of the truths that are being taught that seem to change everything. There's been this continual finger on the pulse of how's it going? Have people been angry? How is there? And it's like, no, there isn't. It's really peaceful. In fact, there's been a lot of good feedback and comments and hope and peace and joy and love coming from this. It's kind of like from the beginning, people have been carrying these branches, and Jesus comes up driving a
With
pickup
an
truck.
F-150.
Yeah, it's saying, throw it in the back. I got this. And it's like, huh. And he's like, I've been here the whole time. But that's how this sermon series feels.
Yeah.
And it seems kind of like from this point on, there's always going to be a pickup truck. I won't go back to dragging the branches because that's exhausting and it causes me to hate summer. But the thing about this upcoming season, I think it invites us. I will always point to Advent into the Advent season for any forms of conflict, hardship. It's our business and our job to bring in peace and love and hope and joy when it feels like everything is falling apart. So Jesus drives a pickup truck.
That's great.
Yeah.
That'd be a good bumper sticker.
No, it would have to have context because then people would say, I don't understand what
Put a
you're
little
saying.
QR code to this podcast.
Okay, before
yeah,
we do what
yeah.
you're about to do, I have no idea how to connect this to what was just said.
That's
so
okay.
don't let this take away from what KJ just said, because he wrapped it up really beautifully. But the part of me that cares for parents and kids and families can't let go of something that we were talking about earlier. I just want to make an appeal to any parents who are listening to this in the middle of May-cember, like touching on the experience that you had, Jenny, of being able to just sit and enjoy your daughter dancing. With all of the busyness, like there are sticks you don't need to carry and there are sticks that you do, but if you got a kid who's like graduating from something, don't get so caught up in the busyness that you miss it. Like, please just stop for a moment and don't miss it. If you've got a kid in a talent show or a play or whatever, like all that can wait for like an hour. Don't miss it. You'll be so glad that you put those sticks down and picked them up again after the performance of the graduation was over. So
They matter.
Yeah.
They matter. So, all right, guys. Well, we will see you next time.